Welcome to today's video. We're going to be reviewing, not necessarily reviewing, but going over good initial positions on Port Bay. Now, after I edited this video and watched it through, this isn't necessarily the best way to do this, but I'm not quite sure what the best way is. I was thinking maybe a little short, like 1-minute clips and shorts for each map, where I pack as much information into a small space as I can to go over each map. I think that might be a better idea. But if you guys have any suggestions on how I make this a better video with the same information across, please let me know, because this is much more difficult for me than to edit up gameplay and explain why I did what I did. On the flip side of that, if you actually like this, please tell me, because I honestly don't see anyone really liking this video. So if you enjoy this, please tell me that it's good so that I can keep doing it, because if you don't, I'll just stop. And also, if you don't think that this is good, tell me that as well, because I don't want to spend time making these and thinking about this type of video if nobody actually enjoys it. So this video is going to be about the Port Bay map. I was suggested by a commenter that I make a series about the different maps and where you're supposed to go in different classes of tanks. And this is a bit of a difficult video to make, because while there are situations that happen quite often, there's also very many different situations, very many different tanks that would influence my decision making and change basically where I end up going. There are two factors that I've determined should affect your decision making on where you go in your positioning the most at the beginning of the game. The first one is your team, and then the second one is the enemy team's lineup. So your team, the reason that should be first is because I'll just give an example here on Port Bay. If you're starting from the red spawn and your whole team starts to go down towards A and you're in a medium tank, the usual medium location is over here at C. If you're not considering your team's positioning to be the most important thing and you still go to C, you're either not going to do anything because the enemy team also went A, or you're going to face 7 tanks coming around this corner and coming up this hill, not be able to run, and die doing under 1,000 damage. So that's why your team is what you have to play off of. It's the limiting factor of your positioning. It's basically everything. And that's why I like to play medium tanks, because I can be the extension, medium tanks and light tanks mostly, I can be the extension of the flank. I can play off of the anchoring heavy tanks as long as they leave spawn. If I'm in a heavy tank, yeah, I can anchor, but I can never guarantee that somebody will create a crossfire for me or flank. When you are a medium or a light tank, that is your job. So starting off, the most easy way to play this map, and the way it honestly just should be played every time, is heavy tanks go up to C, however many you have of them, and then your medium tanks cross first to there. That position is just as good as the far corner. The problem is when the enemy gets to the far corner, you can still hide from this direction. Anyway, your heavy tanks, I covered this in my E5 video, but the heavy tanks have to cross this road and come up to here, otherwise you basically lose the game. So if this area gets occupied by the enemy team, if you're starting in red spawn, and this area gets occupied by any member of the enemy team, and they also sent medium tanks up here, you're basically screwed, because you're in a crossfire, and that's the limit of the position. So we'll put a medium tank there, and then we'll erase our heavy tanks here. If the green heavy tanks end up below C there, this guy is in a crossfire, obviously. You can see he can get shot at from here, and he can get shot at from here. And it doesn't matter if you have, 3 heavy tanks here. These guys are not stopping this guy from shooting the medium tank. So once they push down your medium tank into the river, he can come back to here if he's lucky, or he will just die on this hill, which is what happens 90% of the time. So if you don't push up to C from spawn, you're throwing away your medium support. And then after that, you don't have any map control. You have behind this line and behind this line essentially. And look at how much of the map the enemy team has. The enemy team has this whole area. They can put up crossfires anywhere they want. That's why it's imperative to make sure that you have heavy tanks pushing up under C. I need to point out that while it is your job in a medium or a light tank to cross the river to create crossfire and get initial spots on the enemy team, it's also your job to notice whether or not your heavy tanks are actually going to C. And if they're not going to C, as soon as you get the opportunity, you need to return to your spawn the way you came and regroup from there, because you can't stay on the hill because of the crossfire that I just pointed out. So that covers the positioning. If you're in a heavy tank on Port Bay going C, you want to go underneath the cap, hold down on that hill, or playing this alleyway right here. And sometimes you can play up top on this alleyway here on the right. You generally don't want to go through the river. It's generally not a good idea. And that also covers the medium tank positioning. If you're in a medium tank, you want to go here, and if it's feasible, you can go into this corner as well, but weigh your benefits and your risks, because from here, this is the position I play on this map. I see plenty of people go here, but I also see plenty of people take 1,000 damage crossing there. And when I play this position, I don't get any more shots than I would from this position anyway. So are you just trading at HP for a marginally better position, or because you like this corner better? I mean, maybe. This also puts you at risk of getting pushed by their medium tanks if they have some over here. So that's why I like this rock here, because it gives you crossfire this way. You can shoot at their heavy tanks, you can shoot at their medium tanks, and then you have a little safe area back here. You can go below both tops of the hill. You can go below this ridge and this ridge here, and then you cannot get shot from anywhere except for here and here if you guys get flanked. And if you're getting flanked, you should have noticed that long before something pops up here. That covers the medium tank position, the heavy tank position. If your team's going C and you're in a tank destroyer, it's simple enough. Wherever you can get shots, usually the corner of this little rock here, there's a mound here you can go behind as well. There's also some bushes in this area that you can do, but that only gives you shots on their mediums as they're crossing. So if you're in a mobile tank destroyer, it's good to go here, get crossing shots on their medium tanks initially, but staying here is not really very productive, because if the fight's going on here where it should be with the heavy tanks, you don't have any shots. This whole area is good for if your team goes C and they don't spot anybody. You can play any of this area to spot people driving up through B, crossing A, and so on from that. A spot to avoid is up here. There's very little cover. There's like a very exact position that some smaller tanks can hide in where they're not being shot at from everywhere back here. I really wouldn't recommend going here. It's not a good position. In addition to that, if you're on North Spawn, there's some hills up here that you can take in a tank destroyer as well. A lot of people don't realize that. If you drive up this mound up here, you can sit on top of that. You have shots into C, and you have shots into the medium side, and you are so far away that you won't get spotted. So if you have something with bad dispersion or shell velocity, it's not exactly the best position, but keep in mind, nobody's expecting you to be there. So the reason I didn't suggest you go A side is because to pull off an A side push, it takes a lot of coordination, because you have all these different buildings with different corners on them. There's positions up here for tank destroyers. There's positions here for tank destroyers. There can be heavy tanks in these buildings here at B, at these buildings too. You can get shot from up here. There's a lot of angles that you have to worry about, and if you don't have a coordinated team like in a comp game, which you're not going to, this is a random battle, there will guaranteed be an angle that's open, and then something will drive up and put a crossfire on you if you're in A or anywhere near there. So the only way to effectively play A with a team that decides to go that way is to play pretty passively, unless the enemy team goes C. If the enemy team ends up going C and your team is going A, you need to take a good position to receive their push or know that you're supported by their team, which is just a situational thing that you'll have to end up figuring out. But the initial positions are covered for South Spawn Port Bay here. It's very similar on North Spawn. I'm just going to briefly go over North Spawn. Heavy tanks is the same thing. You need to get across to sea. If they also go sea and you don't get there initially, the other thing I didn't mention is if you just go here to see if they're there, you're never crossing this safely. Like, it's just not going to happen. You'll take hits for it, so just immediately go here as long as you know your team's going to support you. It's the same thing for medium tanks. If you're playing on North Spawn, you want to get to this position initially, which will give you shots across, spotting their heavy tank crossing, spotting their medium tank crossing as you go under here, and then getting shots on their medium tanks there. Tank destroyer positions, there's a couple. As I mentioned before, on top of this hill in the spawn is a surprising one for some players that aren't expecting it. And then there's back in here, you can get shots on the medium tanks. Other than that, there's not really much. You can play this area, but those two are kind of the best sniping positions if that's the way you want to play. Keep in mind, if someone decides to flank through B or something and you're in this area, that's now your responsibility, and you'll have to kite them up through the spawn and hope they don't chase you or something. Playing this ridge if somebody comes up through B is pretty effective too. Like, if you were in this spot shooting at the medium tanks and then somebody came up through B, you could reverse down into this, keep facing them, and now if your heavy tanks turn around as they go over, they're in a perfect crossfire. So yeah, if you reverse down this way, and then now you're shooting at an enemy tank that's here. Let's just say he's here, and then one of your heavy tanks just has to turn its turret and shoot, and now you've got a crossfire going on, and your medium tank can shoot him as well. So if you kite that position can be pretty effective as well. Keep in mind that this tank destroyer position can go both ways, and if you think you see an exposed tank destroyer like this and you decide to push it, your situation could easily turn into this. Here you've pushed up from where you were at the green heavy tank position to one of the two orange heavy tank positions, and now the enemy team is turning to focus you because you popped up on their minimap and are surprising them, and now you're in a major crossfire. In addition, if your team went C, you're completely unsupported in this position anyway, and the enemy team can freely peek you with no repercussions until you back all the way down to where you started at the other green heavy tank position. This is because in the red area, there's no map control from your team, and since your team is on the C side, the green area is showing the map control that your team has. So if you're outside of that green area, chances are you're not supported. This rule works for any map. So that's pretty much it for Port Bay initial positions. The most important thing is that your heavy tanks get to the ridge of C here. Just as a final recap, C is the best side and easiest side to play with a random team on this map. Heavy tanks have to push underneath the C side ridge, and medium tanks should cross to the corner. Not necessarily the far corner position, but just across the river so that they can provide crossfire and support for their heavy tanks. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's much more boring to make and probably to watch than actual gameplay videos, but you guys requested it, so hopefully it was informative. Have a good day, and let me know what you want to see next in the comments.